I was really pleased with the start that I made to my Hand of Man project last week. I think I found some good shots, some strong compositions, even though perhaps the lighting and conditions weren't always in my favour. So this week I want to build on that good start and trying to look for more examples of where man has shaped the Lake District landscape. So I'm starting the week here at the old quarry at Tilberthwaite. Now, I've never been here before, but fortunately I brought a guide with me, somebody that you guys may recognise, Adam Kappa. Now, Adam is another local photographer and we've been friends online for quite some time, but it's taken us nearly a year to finally get together and head out to shoot together. So this is something I've been looking forward to doing for quite some time. Adam and I started shooting down on the water at Coniston Water, and we were with another photographer called Steve Bennett, who's a very good friend of mine. And from there, we moved on to Kelly Hall Tarn. And Kelly Hall Tarn is one of my favourite places to shoot, and it's one of the places that I feel works well, particularly around this time of year, with a blue sky. And that's just as well, because that's exactly what we've got today. Now, one of the problems that I have as a photographer is that I like to plan all of my shoots. So before I go onto location, I know exactly the composition that I'm going to shoot. Now, when I arrive on location, I tend to be very, very single-minded. And if the conditions don't suit the shot, I carry on regardless. Now, today we have blue skies, and blue skies don't necessarily work very well in a landscape photograph. So this week, what I hope to do is to challenge myself to try and work more with the conditions. And I think in these circumstances, that probably means working on more intimate shots. Now, just because I am looking for more intimate compositions, it doesn't mean that I'm going to abandon all of my photographic principles. And one of the things that I always try to do is to include something in the frame that acts as the primary subject, that can be a focal point for the image. Now, here I've found this small entrance that leads into a cave or the mine, part of the quarry itself. So I'm going to use that as my primary subject. And then the rest of this composition is all about trying to fit in the boulders that sit around the entrance. So this is something a little bit different to what I would normally do. Now, I have to be honest, I've been a bit concerned about using some of the mines here in the Lake District. There's a lot of slate mining and there's been a lot of things like copper mining here as well. And I was a bit concerned because initially the concept of the project was to show the positive impact that man has had on this landscape. And in many ways these quarries are little more than a scar in the landscape. So I am a little bit concerned about that. And I don't know whether I'm going to include shots of the quarries or if I'm actually going to be much more honest in my project and include some of the potentially negative impact that man has had as well. This morning I've come back to Castle Rigg Stone Circle. I was here last week and I wanted to get something a little more intimate, just focusing on a couple of the stones. But when the sky's doing this, you've just got to shoot wide. Well, that was exciting. Anyway, now that the sky has calmed down, I can revert back to my original plan, which was to try some compositions that focus on just part of the stone circle itself. When I was here last week, the shot that I took, although it had a brilliant sky, it tried to include too much of the stone circle, in my opinion, and it didn't make enough of the stones. The stones were too small in the frame. So I'm trying to do a shot showing the hand of man. Although you could see the stone circle itself, the stones were too small. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try a few different compositions that are just focusing in on part of the stone circle. First shot I'm going to go for, it has about half of the stone circle in it, and that makes much more of the mountains behind it as well, so creating a much more interesting background. Once you start focusing in on just a few of the stones, the big problem you get here is then separation between the stones that are in the foreground and the stones that are behind them. And so once again, cranking the big bend rope up as high as it will go, and that just creates that little bit of gap between the stones at the front and the stones at the back. So I think that's a much better composition. I'm much happier with that. It shows this much more of the stones. And actually, in hindsight, you can see much more of the background and much more of the sky. So I could have used that bright sky that we had earlier. So that's something to bear in mind next time I'm here. So it's about 9 o'clock now, 9:15, something like that, and the sun would be fully up if it hadn't completely clouded over. So you've got no direct light at all. Very soft diffuse light. Now these are the conditions that I think I need to be picking out detail more often. So what I've done is I've picked 3 stones that are sat very close together, and I'm focusing in on those, and I've got a bit of the mountain behind it as a bit of background. Now my big decision here is all about depth of field. Do I go for shallow depth of field, or do I try and get some front to back sharpness? So I'm going to take 2 shots, I'm going to edit them exactly the same way, and I'm going to transition from one to the other, and you're going to tell me which one you like the best. The Lake District is obviously very well known these days for tourism. We have thousands and thousands of visitors each year flocking to places like here in Glenridding. And they come for the mountains and they come for the walking. And that means that throughout the Lake District there are some beautiful paths which are in themselves a work of art. And that's what I've come here to photograph today. Let me talk you through today's composition. This is the path that runs from Glenridding up to Helvellyn, and I came down this a few weeks ago after I'd climbed Birkhouse Moor, which is just here, and I thought this was absolutely beautiful. It's so beautifully made, and I think it makes a great leading line up to Birkhouse Moor in the distance. And I've also got these dry stone walls on either side, and even this small gate up here. So I guess this is a slightly more complex composition than I would normally go for. Now, this video is supposed to all be about intimate shots, and this isn't a particularly intimate shot. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and see if I can find something else that works while you check out this shot. This is the composition that I've found, and I haven't had to come too far from where I was shooting. Maybe a couple of 100 yards. I crossed over this stream and we have the path leading up and then kicking round to the right. And at the end of the path is a tree. So very simple composition using the path to lead your eye up to the tree. Nothing else to it. One of the other things that we have in the Lake District that are man-made are our forests, including this one here at Winlatter. Probably for the first time since I went full-time, I was a little bit late leaving the house this morning. I didn't leave home until gone 10 o'clock. When I woke up, it was very grey and very dreary and not very inspiring. So I headed over here to Winlatter, and I'm glad I did, because since I've been here, I've had some pockets of quite nice light. I've been wandering around these forest tracks now for about an hour, and there is evidence of the hand of man everywhere that you look. But the image that I had in my head was one of those arrow-straight avenues of trees that you get when the forest has been man-made. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find one. So the first image that I'm going to go for is of the view looking back towards Skiddaw. As I've been walking along this forest track here, there have been a couple of things that caught my eye. The first thing were the larch trees, which have gone a beautiful yellow colour. So obviously I wanted to find a composition that included those. The second thing that caught my eye was the skiddaw itself. And so it's just a case of trying to find a pleasing composition that brought those two elements together. Now fortunately I've been able to find one that has quite strong diagonals. We have two lines of trees which create an intersection, and then behind that we've got the mountain itself. Shot in the bag, it's now time for me to start thinking about getting something a little bit more intimate. Maybe something a little bit more like the original shot that I had in mind. Now, it would appear that I've accidentally climbed a mountain. You see, what happened was, I went through the forest looking for a composition like the one I described earlier, and then I kind of ran out of forest and just sort of kept going, really. This is the summit of Grisdale Pike. It's about 760 metres above sea level. And I'm not particularly fit at the moment, and I wouldn't consider climbing this in a million years. So it just goes to show that mountain climbing is all in your head, and anything's possible if you don't set your mind to it. Mrs. Sale is going to go mental if she ever finds out that I've climbed up a mountain by accident, particularly as I'm not really properly equipped. I haven't got my walking poles with me, which I use to try and keep me stable. So this is strictly between you and me. She mustn't ever find out. It just goes to show that these videos don't always go to plan. Anyway, I did manage to get a few shots while I was up here, so you check those out while I get myself back down to the car. You don't get days as grey as this one very often. This is the Haweswater Reservoir, and I've come here this morning to get a shot of the water tower that was created using the remains of the church at Mardale, which was in the valley that they flooded in order to create the reservoir. Unfortunately, the gate to this access road is padlocked, and I for one do not advocate going places where people don't want you to go. As I look up the reservoir, I can see another gate with a path that leads down to the edge of the reservoir. Now, as I've been driving along, I've been checking out all the gates, and they've all been padlocked so far. So I suspect that that one is padlocked as well. But there's only really one way to find out. As I suspected, this gate is padlocked too. Now, there is a gap in the wall here where people have been climbing around, but I'm not going to do that for the reasons I've already explained. But I'm not going to be defeated. There is one thing I can do, and that is to write to United Utilities, who look after the reservoir, to see if there's any way that I can get any kind of special access. Now, there is a permissive path that runs around this side of the reservoir, but that's currently closed due to safety issues. And so we'll just have to see what they say. This is the Haweswater Dam that they built to create the reservoir by flooding the Mardale Valley. Now, again, lots of lock gates, so I can't get any closer, but this video is supposed to be about intimate compositions. Now, I think this dam is very difficult to photograph in its entirety, so this might be perfect for a slightly more intimate shot, particularly as behind the dam there is a bit of autumn colour. It really is very difficult to get a shot from the road of some of the more interesting man-made features here at Haweswater. I really have no other option but to get in touch with United Utilities and see if there's any way that I can get some sort of better access. Now the worst they can do is say no, but they just might be interested in a project designed to show the positive impact that man has had on the Lake District landscape.